Doug.
Yes.
Hi.
Hey there.
So, are you welcoming me?
Welcome back.
You come from some interesting other industries as well that you wrote about.
Indeed, yeah. Lots of food, lots of agriculture, crime, almost every... Yeah.
Jeez, but really, though, that's intense.
It is brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can cut all of that.
This is The Naturalist. In every episode, we're covering the products, ideas, and trends that are shaping the CPG industry.
Or that we just really like.
Okay, well, we have so much to talk about. Doug, if you have not tuned into the podcast when he's been on or seen him in the many forms that he shows up in across New Hope Network, he's our senior retail reporter, does amazing work, not just on the retail landscape, but also a lot of investor content, trends, all things CPG, really.
All things the industry, yes. If it's in our industry, I'll write about it.
But also, I layered today.
Nice layering, too.
And I have one, and then I can go down to a T-shirt. I also have a buff.
Cool buff. I've never seen that before. I like that.
I know. Well, I actually reconnected with a really good friend from high school. It was actually my prom date. I do have a photo. I was in this pink dress, and he coordinated with a pink baseball glove and a pink.
That's awesome.
He's awesome, but he's the DJ for the Colorado Buffs, for the City Bus football team.
Yeah.
So he does all their locker room music. His name's DJ Fedora. Well, I did when he was Kent, and he's great. So I guess this is a nod to Kent /
Fedora. Nice. I love it.
And also a way to stay nice and cool so that you don't have to hear me talking about the heat all the time. Okay, but let's bring the heat.
Yeah.
About retail trends, hot retail trends.
Right.
And you also have something coming up. So you're doing a lot of this work because we're introducing a new newsletter.
That's
right. So tell us about the new newsletter before we dig in.
The new newsletter is going to it's pretty much going to cover just everything in our industry. It's going to be once a week. It's going to be a deep dive. And the first couple one's about sort of the state, in a way, of the plant-based meat industry, which really skyrocketed up until about 2022. Then it kind of has a lot of turmoil. I'm kind of looking at where it is now. Another one is kind of the regen, so that we're going from products to just, the sort of the regen movement. I'm working on one right now about NA because it's dry January. So it's just going to run the gamut, whatever,
So what are some of the things that you look for in a retail-worthy newsletter or piece of content? What are some of the things that you think retailers are asking about trends or opportunities?
Well, so for the two I mentioned, let's say the NA, especially the NA and the plant-based, one thing that's of interest in both of those is merchandising. NA is complicated. Where it wasn't long ago that all NA was beer. It was okay. Wasn't great. That was kind of it. There wasn't really much else. But in the past 5 years, there's every category. And so where do you put it in your store for it to make sense? I just talked to someone who said this is the head of the ANBA was saying, we're looking at how alt dairy positioned itself. Mm-hmm. Alt dairy, it could have been in its own little section somewhere that's called alt dairy, but it is an alt dairy section, but it's always right there with the dairy. Someone going to buy milk says, "Oh, here's an alternative milk," and this Marcos was saying, we're trying to encourage retailers to figure out how to make sure that their NA is near the alcohol products,
right? Because
94% of people who buy NA actually drink. So they're doing it to either moderate their own behavior or because they have guests for parties and they want to make sure they're hospitable. So, it's stuff like that. Just tips about things like merchant. Same thing comes up with the plant-based. And they also brought up dairy again. I talked to some people in that industry and they're like, again, dairy does very well, plant-based dairy. Should the plant-based sausages, for example, be not in the same case, of course, as the meat, but it should be right next to it, or just somewhere else distant in the store where you happen to find, here's a refrigerator full of. So that's interesting. So that kind of stuff, I love digging into tips for how to merchandise. That's just one example. But
have there been any other of those trends or opportunities that you're really thinking retailers hone in on this now?
Another thing that I've written up just one of these early columns is regen, and regen had nothing to do with merchandising, although it feasibly could. Sprouts had its own end cap, or its own its own end cap of just regen. But for regen, the challenge is more marketing.
Yeah.
So and of course the brands have to do a lot of marketing, but the retailers need to participate too. And regen is complicated, unlike organic, where the message, even though organic is actually complicated to sort of fulfill it as a farmer, the end consumer, it's like the ultimate message was, there's no chemicals, it's better for me, I think I'll buy it. Whereas regen doesn't necessarily have that, but it has the storytelling is potentially very rich with regen. But the question is, how do you do it in a way that resonates with consumers?
Yeah.
And again, the brands do their bit with their websites, and a lot of them do a good job on package, but it's now in the retailer's hands. And I know that for example, the ROA, the Regenerative Organic Alliance, has been sort of training retailers in sort of marketing tactics.
Yeah.
How do we talk about this in a way that is resonant with consumers?
So whether it's with that or the other conversation around merchandising, obviously there's a lot of nuance when we're looking at retail because you have independent natural retailers, you have regional chains, you have food, drug, mass, big box store, all these retailers. And at this point, we're reaching all of them because they're all in. I mean, I'm a Costco shopper, as any good millennial is.
That's right.
Millennials love our Costco. But the amount of organic that they have, I mean, I also love my independent natural grocery.
For sure.
But I'm just saying, I can love both. And because I do, I see that there are so many similarities in.
Right.
But there's also, of course, major differences. So when you're writing, how do you speak to all these different retailers?
I don't, when I'm writing, I don't put one category in mind, like I'm now talking to conventional versus our people. But of course, there are big differences. I mean, I think since it's the sort of the industry, our publications and this, we grew out of the natural and organic independent stores. I think ultimately I target their world, but I think that their world it's been adopted by conventional. And I think it works just as well. If I'm thinking about them, I think conventional it works just as well for conventional to think, well, how do we market this? How do we merchandise this? It's going to be very similar. But I do think it's an ongoing story. It's not new. But I do think, I mean, every year there's more market share by conventional over the independent natural and organic grocers. And I'm just curious to see, it's just an interesting story to see what are the independents doing to sort of make sure they remain highly relevant, highly competitive? And they're doing a good job, but it's just fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I think that one of the things that I will always respect and love about independent natural retailers is the amount of customer education
100%.
and customer service. And that's something that, being someone who shops in all different places for all different things, you do not get that anywhere else. And so I think that consumer education piece is huge. Some of the experiences that independent natural retailers bring to customers through, they'll do education workshops, have community events, all these things that, do you think people, I'm sort of leading on this one, but people are craving that more again, like more of that community and connection? Do you think we'll see that in 25?
I think so. I think it's very important. I think, for example, Natural Grocers, pretty big chain in our industry, I think Natural Grocers does an exceptional job at building community. And I think if they gave up on that, they would lose. I mean, they have to do that. It's very important, I think. When people go, and there are people, as you know, who are like Natural Grocers groupies.
Yeah.
And that's the only place they love it because all the produce is organic. But outside of that, a lot of the products are, fairly similar to what you might find in a Sprouts or Whole Foods. But they do such a good job with education, with signage, with their staff is so knowledgeable that I feel like the people who are groupies, as one of the reasons they go there, and if that vanished, I think they might say, well, I don't need to go to Natural Grocers anymore. That's part of the deal was they helped me so much.
Right. Yeah. I'm just lingering on Natural Grocers groupies. That's just hilarious. Yeah. But it is true. It's these things that just really make customers loyal to. Yeah. And I guess a question that I have about that is loyalty, is retail loyalty something that we think we'll continue to see in an omni-channel world where people, and one of the big trends we talk about is flexitarian living. So people are buying conventional for some things, natural for others. Sounds like you're saying natural retail loyalty is not dead because we have Natural Grocers
for
groupies.
Sure. Oh yeah. I mean, there's Sprouts groupies too. I mean, obviously there's Whole Foods groupies. I mean, I think there's loyalty as part. I mean, if you just were trying to get the cheapest thing, you might just go to your big box. Of course, this selection won't be nearly as good, but you could scatter around and probably just find cheaper things. But I think it's the loyalty that keeps them coming. Even though, okay, this might be 40 cents cheaper if I went across town to this other place, I don't care. I'd rather be at this place because I'd like being here.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Any other like differentiators? I mean, we talk about as in differentiators that smaller natural retailers are kind of focusing on for the year ahead. Standards is something we talk a lot about. Are there other things that are standing out?
You know, and this applies to some extent to conventional, but not the big boxes. But I think one thing we've seen is the emergence of food service being a big part of those. Like, for example, natural grocers doesn't do it, but a lot do use food service. And, you know, restaurants have become so expensive. And so people are, they're having to sort of think much more than they did maybe 5 years ago about whether to go out to eat at all. But a lot of people don't want to cook either. So the food service is that kind of middle ground, much cheaper than a restaurant, not as cheap as cooking, but you don't have to cook. So I think they're really innovating on that food service front. I think that's pretty important for the industry.
Yeah, I like that ongoing shift and getting creative around like in-store cafes and other ways to deliver prepared foods to customers, or even like ready to bake,
100%.
meals, which I think is great.
And there's also some cool things happening that tie to some of those other trends. I think it was, you had written about this, so you can tell me which retailer it was, but was talking about like an NA, I think they were doing like a functional beverage bar in store or something. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do, and I forget which retailer that was. Maybe it was Jimbo's. I don't remember, but that's could be Earth Fare. Yeah. That is a very clever idea, though, for sure.
But things like that, like creating experiences across growing categories, I think is something that both independent natural chains and mass retailers have a good opportunity to do.
Yeah, wouldn't it be fun? Remember the old soft, the sort of the fast yogurt places that sprung up everywhere, and you go and try every. What if you went into like a natural grocer and it was like, here's like an ashwagandha kombucha. Try a little sample, and then you can mix and match. You can make your own like glass full. I want some kombucha. I want some turmeric in there too. Well, I definitely want maca in there. I mean, that'd be kind of fun.
Doug's million. This is right here. Someone take it.
Yeah.
Or are you gonna? Maybe
I'll go ahead and innovate on that front. Yeah. I need some investors first, though.
All right, I want to talk about Gen Z for a second.
Please do, yeah.
Very important. And one of the things that's really interesting to me, and I have an article that I wrote, I also presented some of this information at NBJ Summit last July, and then we have an article in Natural Foods Merchandiser and on newhope.com, is that Gen Z are actually returning to in-store for their purchases. And they're less likely than other generations to purchase their supplements. A lot of this was around supplements specifically on Amazon and online than other generations. And I thought that was so interesting because at least for me, I've always thought like Gen Z and even Gen Alphas, I guess there's Alpha and Alpha. Anyways, are really, really doing all their shopping online. And so to see that shift, the interesting thing also about it is that they're tending to buy their supplements in mass market retail rather than independent. When I'm at Target, I always see like Gen Zers milling around the supplement.
Interesting.
But whatever, But my observations. But I think an example is Target and how great Target has been around sourcing really innovative products, health, wellness, or beauty products. They often turn to, companies that have been successful on social media and some of these that are really targeting Gen Z. But also like Target kind of aligns with a certain lifestyle and has that like experiential aspect. It's like a thing to go to Target and to buy your products and explore what they have. But I'm curious what you're seeing around that and what you've heard around Gen Z shopping patterns that is either, unexpected or represents some opportunity.
I haven't delved deep into Gen Z as you have. I do. But the thing is, it's my impression was that it's because, the younger they are, the more they're going to shop online. And I think it's very interesting that more and more are actually shopping in store. And I think that I do have a Gen Z daughter. And I know that there's this, there's something she doesn't hesitate. It's always going to be online. But for example, one thing that's bigger in her world now is dinner parties. And they love getting together and cooking. And yes, they'll use their phone, the Instagram, to cook the cool viral thing that they saw. But they love just hanging out and doing stuff in person, because I think there was a period where it was also new and novel. I used to live with my phone all the time. I think these Gen Zers, my youngest is 22 right now, and that they kind of been through that, and they're sort of, yeah, that's useful for certain things, but I also want to experience the world. And it's interesting how they're going to buy supplements of all things. I think it's just very cool.
Well, and that example is so interesting of the dinner party, but then documenting that on social media.
For sure. Oh, yeah.
Even through some of this research, it's like they're doing a lot of, and this is Gen Z consumers, are doing a lot of their research online. So they're like the adopters of AI. We'll have a whole episode about AI.
Yes.
We have lots to talk about there too. But, using AI, using social media, using, influencers and all these different ways to gather information, but then creating the experience in person or having the shopping experience or that dinner party, and then going to social to document it and talk about the product or talk about that dinner party. So it's kind of interesting to think about that consumer journey, which maybe starts digitally, has this in-person piece, and then goes digital again.
For sure. And I certainly think with, I'll just use the example of my daughter, but I don't think I've ever seen her buy food. Not prepared, just any kind of food online, but loves, both of my daughters are kind of food obsessed, and they're always looking at videos about cooking and products. But when it comes time to buy the thing, they're going to go into the store to buy it.
Yeah.
But it's the social that actually gets them into the store.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I have another trend that I want to talk about, and this one I feel like is a little taboo. So,
okay,
are we ready for it?
I think so.
So I've been seeing a lot of data on more and more retailers investing in innovative private label products and lines. And that feels like a smart move for many retailers, also highly competitive to our CPG brands,
100%.
Especially early stage brands. We know how hard it is for companies to get on shelf, stay on shelf, well, not stay on shelf, move off shelf.
Right.
And so what do we make of that?
In the private labeling world, there's innovation obviously going on, but it's probably not, if you have your own brand, you're not taking the sort of mass innovation that's going into all these other people who want to do the same thing, the product that a private label. You should really lean into your own unique innovation and see what's going on out there and say, okay, well, I can see that these retailers all have this whatever, but I'm going to do a different version of that no one else is doing.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point, that some of the most innovative innovations will still come from those brands that are highly specialized, that can tell their sourcing story, that can talk about the innovation rather than kind of a more generic or widespread approach.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you're absolutely right. I think the branding is key. The private label, there's only so much branding you can do with your private label that's all over a retailer's store. The brands have this opportunity to really carve out unique identities, to really innovate beyond what they're seeing at the private label level. And again, as you said earlier, just again, focus on those retailer relations. So very, very important. And that's one of the beauties of Expo and Newtopia.
Definitely.
That's where you've got to make those connections and keep them alive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the flip side of that is that we're seeing a lot of retailers, the flip side of the private label conversation, we're seeing these retailers with amazing accelerator programs and amazing early stage programs.
For sure.
The Forager teams at Newtopia now. We had Target's accelerator program. All these incredibly impactful initiatives that are coming to life that are saying, we're going to help companies not only get on shelf, but be successful there and thrive and follow them through that brand journey. So I think there's a lot of great things happening in that relationship building space.
For sure.
Okay, anything else? Any other big predictions for what's going to be happening in retail in 2025?
Okay, I'm going to pull out my handy-dandy phone where I had notes. And I do think we saw this during the Nexties, is the Ozempic effect isn't just going to hit the supplement industry, which obviously it's going to be a pretty big deal there. We saw so many products that were high on the protein, pushing the protein. And, I think that does matter to retailers. In addition to making sure you're nailing your supplement aisles with the protein powders and the rest of it, You also, I mean, there was like high protein spaghettis. There was, you name it. There were things, and a lot of that, I'm sure that's driven by looking ahead and saying, oh my God, when this Ozempic becomes much cheaper than it is now, and a lot of people are taking it, they're going to need more protein and the rest, and we want to be out front. And I think the retailers also need to think about that.
Yeah. And I think that increasingly we're seeing retailers in the natural space kind of align or be complementary to these things that we're seeing in the pharmaceutical industry and in more kind of mainstream healthcare solutions. And that alignment is really interesting as well.
100%. Yeah, totally. AI is another thing retailers, there's going to be so much opportunity for apparently very affordable tools, very clever uses of even just ChatGPT. I mean, even like staff training. Apparently that's, to get a person on the floor, let's say at a big actual grocer's, you go into something now it's very complex and they get a lot of training. But if a customer asks a question and you have to go on your phone, you don't quite know, and you have to Google and then scroll and search for things, they're calling, instead of search engines, they're calling some of these LLMs answer engines. And it's going to be everything from a staff member just quickly answering your question to AI, the smart carts between your phone and the cart, those two things being aligned. Check out while you go. The cart tells you where the sales are in the store, whether they're even out of something that's on your list. I mean, that's going to transform retail.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the story I just wrote, also, I talked to some people in the industry who said, look, this isn't just for the big players. It isn't like you have to have hundreds of millions to even begin thinking about it. You can get started now, where there's a lot of tools for small retailers to sort of leverage now.
I think that's a key reminder, is that like anyone can start.
That's right. 100%.
And so that article will be found.
That's going to be I think it's on. No, it'll be in NFM
and online, right?
And online.
Okay.
Yes.
So you can read all about that.
Indeed.
And the ability to capture all this data of your consumers and then do something with that and really understand who your shopper is, build those relationships, support their shopping experience in so many ways. I think it's really exciting.
Really, previously to take all that, first of all, it was hard to even collect the data, was difficult. But then to make sense of it, you have to hire some very expensive firm to go in and make sense of all this data. They're not going to need to do that anymore.
Yeah. So more efficiencies and the ability to do more with less. All right. Well, this was great, Doug, as always.
Yeah, awesome.
We should do this again.
We totally should.
Yeah. Remember to check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you get your podcasts. Subscribe, rate, and also check us out on YouTube. And that's all, folks.
Yay.